1619 Project and critical race theory. Critical race theory, more importantly, is being taught as basic curriculum across the country.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that the 1619 Project, although historically inaccurate and very stupid, I think that it's being taught in maybe some select schools, but it's not like a national curriculum, right?
I'm pretty sure it well, maybe
it's a New York Times
maybe
project.
You can say. Yeah. And schools are teaching it like crazy because these teachers, they hold this ideology.
See, that's like crazy. Where is it happening here? Where's this?
Well, I follow James Lindsay for this stuff, to be honest.
I don't know where I actually was unaware that the 1619 Project was being taught widespread in schools.
Teachers really like
What is the gist of it?
The 1619? It's a historically inaccurate account of basically America's founding, and they argue that America was founded on I don't even fully understand it either because I just know it's stupid and inaccurate.
From Education Next, educators around the country are indeed teaching the 1619 Project. What precisely students and other interested observers are learning is another question. The 1619 Project is certainly educational, or at least instructive, but not only in the ways it was intended, and they go on to explain what it is. Okay. In the classroom, Random House children's books announce plans to publish 4 1619 projects, books for young readers, 1 young adult, et cetera, et cetera. So yes.
Yeah. I mean, so that would definitely be a problem. But
would it be better that they learned like a very patriotic pro-America or a very anti-America?
It would be better for them to learn the truth about America and not have a
What's
biased,
the truth?
The historically accurate account of how America got started, right?
Based on which art, like which author, which literature?
I don't know. Do you know?
Well, so an example would be some might tell you, notably, like the New York Times, that America truly started in 1619, right? That's their opinion.
Even the author of the 16, or even one of the people on 1619 acknowledged that it wasn't really historically accurate.
Yeah, it's funny because only like way later, after like they started getting attacked relentlessly nonstop, but they won Pulitzers for it. So
this is just my problem, though, is see, this is Donald Trump trying to combat this 1619 Project by doing something that I would argue is just as bad. I don't want a biased.
So what was his curriculum that he was going to teach?
He was going to teach a pro-patriotic, which would be explicitly biased in favor of America. That kind of a curriculum, like that's brainwashing also, right?
Yeah.
We want to teach kids the truth. And listen, here's something else. I promise you, I know this sounds like it's unrelated, but it is. One of the things I talk about a lot on my channel is the fat acceptance movement, which are the body positivity people, the people that are really fat that claim that, oh, just who cares about health? Let's just love your body. I've always argued that if you love your body, you would work to change your body and work to improve it. And I think the exact same thing goes for the country. As a dad, I want this country to be better. I want this country to be better for my kids. And I don't think that you can push for genuine and accurate change if you have a brainwashed interpretation of America. And that
Do you like Star Wars?
That goes for the 1619 Project as well. Not really. No.
You don't like Star Wars?
Not really.
Did you watch the original?
Yeah.
What did you think of that with like Luke Skywalker and Tatooine and the Death Star?
Of course.
What do you think about it?
Yeah, it's all right.
Who do you think? Do you like Luke Skywalker and the Jedi?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. You think what he did was cool?
I haven't watched that movie in a really long time, and admittedly, I have not researched on my Star Wars before coming on.
But Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, they were cool, right? They were heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think it's cool that some scraggly religious zealots from a desert planet took a cargo ship and blew up a military base? That's Star Wars.
I guess so.
And that's not like that point is made by the left when they say people watch Star Wars and don't understand why they're cheering for it. They're cheering for a religious faction from a desert planet taking a cargo ship and rebel fighter pilots and then blowing up a military base. Mm-hmm. It's actually Clerks, I think, with what was it, the Kevin Smith film, made a really good point. They were contractors and janitors and like regular people just working on this base who had no idea what was going on. Yeah, and they all got killed.
According to the guy in Clerks, people that are contractors have political bias and they choose to work at those companies. So they may
you choose to work on a military base. So when Al Qaeda blows it up, that's your own fault. The point is, you talk about being Trump's pro-America view of the world, and it's like, sure, you could argue that the founding fathers were insurrectionist terrorists who were just greedy slave owners and wanted to reject the crown because the crown wanted its cut. And furthermore, the British were defending the seas for the American colonies. The ingrates were angry over a tea tax because they didn't want to pay their fair share.
Well,
it's kind of ridiculous, right?
Yeah, of course. And I'm not saying that that's the alternative to Donald Trump's approach. What I'm arguing for is just a historically accurate interpretation.
Maybe that's what would have happened.
of history. But and if that was how it was told, that wouldn't be historically accurate.
Well, that's based on, people's interpretation, because you could interpret history in many different ways. But I agree with your point that our kind of higher learning institutions, our school institutions are corrupted. But I don't think it's because of Trump. I think they've been like that for a very long time, especially since their institution under the Rockefeller policies that wanted to make good factory workers. And that's essentially what kind of school is in our modern day and age. So there's a couple of things that come up to mind when you're talking about this. One interesting one was the recent decision by Cornell University that recently decided that they're going to be making the vaccine mandatory, the COVID-19 vaccine mandatory, but only for white students. I was wondering what
is that actually a true story?
Yes. Cornell vaccine mandate only applies to white students.
And the best part is,
wait,
hold on. There's one more too. In Oregon, they're doing grants for COVID that only go to black businesses. So it's like,
So when you have institutions like that are hired by the state,
can I have a little more context on that Cornell?
I could send you the article.
Let me pull it up.
if you want, and we could look into it. There's also
that
another.
Sounds bizarre.
There's also another incident that I would love to get your kind of feedback on. In New York City, we have the school superintendent literally arguing and trying to make it a mandate that if there's a poor white kid and a middle class or rich black kid, that school resources should predominantly go to the black kid, not to the poor white kid.
We got it from the College Fix. Cornell vaccine mandate only applies to white students, saying, quote, "We recognize that due to long-standing systemic racism and health inequities in this country, individuals from some marginalized communities may have concerns about needing to agree to such requirements. For example, historically, the bodies of the black, indigenous, and people of color have been mistreated and used by people in power, sometimes for profit or medical gain. It is understandable that the current compact requirement may feel suspect or even exploitative to some BIPOC members of the Cornell community. Additionally, recent acts of violence against black people by law enforcement may contribute to feelings of distrust or powerlessness. While the university strongly recommends that non-white students comply voluntarily because long-standing social inequalities and health disparities have resulted in COVID-19 disproportionately affecting BIPOC individuals, they will be granted an exemption if they cite their racial identity."
I mean, that's definitely very bull. That's definitely like some bullshit right there. I think what they're doing is like, because systemic racism, for example, is 100% a real thing, but that is probably the dumbest, most idiotic way imaginable.
But that's all of what it is.
But it's not, though, because you do have your
Name me a good policy.
You have your, what do you mean?
Like if that's an example of like doing it wrong, what's an example of rectifying systemic racism correctly?
Sure. So in these, for example, majority black communities where they have much more rates of poverty and higher rates of crime, obviously the reason for the high crime rate is because of poverty. So I would, I'm not a policy maker, but I would like to see more investment into those areas, because if we were, for example, able to open up better businesses, give people more jobs, hire people, that's step one.
That's gentrification. You're talking about sending in the white upper class to black neighborhoods to gentrify the neighborhood, to price them out? You're a racist.
No. I'm not arguing for that at all. No, I'm not.
What
I'm arguing for is investing in that country.
What money? Where does the money come from?
It might be.
This is called gentrification.
No, gentrification is when white people move in and then rent prices go up.
That's a simplification. Yeah. Gentrification. If they come in and they start putting all this money into buildings and infrastructure, and then the property values start skyrocketing, these black families are going to get priced out, taxed out, and they're going to get kicked out.
That's not what I want to happen. What I want to see happen is more business investments specifically.
So let me ask you a question. If more businesses start popping up in these neighborhoods, right, will property value go up?
You tell me.
Yeah, well, the answer is yes, of course. More business means more taxes, means more commerce, more tax revenue, better streets, better buildings, better repairs, and tax goes up, right?
Right.
What do you think happens to these poor black families who now can't pay the higher tax rates because their property value went up?
Well, that's the problem right there is, see, I don't want these big companies to just come in, start opening up, and then raising the prices. What I want is to see a proper investment into this area where not only is it just people coming along opening
investment
businesses,
from who?
Into what?
Listen.
Hold on.
You understand what you're saying is extremely racist. You're promoting the eviction of black families.
No. What you're doing is you're trying to use this like liberal hypocrisy thing on me. I know.
What I'm telling you is, what you're advocating for by the left is considered wrong.
I don't care what the left thinks. I'm not a leftist.
But
I'm not on the left or the right. I stand by my positions. That's what I do.
When I'm telling you that you're proposing a policy to end systemic racism, You're not.
That's not my policy. That's would be one
You-
option
you-
here.
okay,
would
so-
be to
so
be-
listen.
Another option would be we need to stop funding schools with the taxes collected in that neighborhood, obviously, because that creates a vicious cycle where then you have poor people going to shit schools and it repeats forever. That's another example of what we can do to fix it. But again, I'm not a policymaker, and I recognize that what I've said about investing in those areas is a rather surface level and simplified version of what I think could help. For me, I'm more interested in talking to people about systemic racism right now because we first have to acknowledge that the problem even exists before we can go about fixing the problem. And
How would you define systemic racism?
well, I define systemic racism a little differently than I think a lot of people would. For me, systemic racism would be, it's oftentimes like you can see it in history and then you can see it today still. So you can see where that racist policy was created, how it affected blacks, and how it's still affecting them today. In my
Or
mind,
any other minority group.
or any other minority group. Sure, like systemic racism majorly that's not right.
Majorly?
Majorly affects like black people for the most part, but yeah, there other
it?
people can be victims of systemic racism too.
Does it? Does it predominantly affect black families or black people?
Yeah, and that's because a lot of the reasons that black people are in the position they are today is, of course, because of historical racist policies from America. Like redlining is a perfect example.
And blockbusting.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of them. Even the war on drugs, right? Which I mean, Joe Biden further exacerbated with the crime bill. Like, there's plenty of
CIA. Luke, you know about CIA and crack, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Of course,
Yeah,
with,
there was also the crack versus cocaine thing. Right?
Let me tell you, the modern left right now doesn't understand what systemic racism is, and neither does the right. They think systemic means institutionalized. And so it's really hard to have a conversation with people about systemic racism because they immediately think institutionalized.
Right.
So their response immediately is like, well, then tell me about an institution that's like, no, I'm talking about systemic.
Right.
And they say, well, you mean historical. I'm like, yes, that's what systemic meant. The system created a problem. We're not talking about the institution of policing or hospitals or schools. We're talking about the easiest example I give to people is, because I did a documentary on this, Pruitt-Igoe public housing in St. Louis, the St. Louis County racial housing covenants in the suburbs. Most people don't realize that St. Louis isn't one city. When people say St. Louis, they're referring to like 90 different cities. All of these little tiny cities that surround it going westward that were formed because white people were fleeing the inner city due to increasing poverty and crime and because of racism. They created new townships and then immediately enacted racial covenants. So these are laws that are no longer legal.
Right.
But it basically created a system. It created a two-tier, I'm oversimplifying things for sure, but you basically create two tracks where one is doing well and one is doing poorly. You get rid of the laws that made this problem happen, like redlining or blockbusting, and now we're dealing with the generational after effects of why these people are in poverty, why there's crime in their areas.
Yeah.
The problem is we're now at a point now where after we've gotten rid of the racist laws, we had racist law, we had racial covenants, and now we have the modern left advocating for bringing back racial law. And I'm like, well, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Like talking about policies directed towards different races or affirmative action like policies. You're just talking about creating more laws. Like, look at it this way. If you went back in time and said, we're going to create a law for white people to protect them, then people would argue, but it's just a positive thing. It doesn't hurt them. It's well, no, it's creating a disproportionate effect, which will result in one, group of people doing better than the other, which will lead to poverty, crime, and other detriments because you're essentially, you can make the argument, but ultimately you have a two-track system, creates systemic racism. Today, they're saying basically the same thing. And if you look at like Ibram X. Kendi, his argument is that we need more discrimination. That's what we need, more discrimination. And that's like, okay, he would have fit in really, really well with the people in the 50s who wanted separate but equal.
Right. That's
basically what he's advocating for. More, he says the solution to past discrimination is present discrimination. Or I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like that.
Present discrimination, what, towards white people?
No, towards everybody.
Oh, like he just wants to continue being.
Yeah. So his idea is like, I'm trying to steel man his argument that if you have people who are disproportionately affected by past, historical precedent and laws, then we need to target different communities based on race and discriminate positively or negatively, meaning negative towards one group that's doing too well, like Asians, for instance, and positive towards, say, Latinos who aren't doing as well.
Yeah, see, I would disagree with that entirely. I don't think that we should be stifling one to try to bring them down. I think what we should try to be doing is helping the communities that are where they are today because of American policies in the past get to where everyone else is. I've never agreed with this idea of tearing one down to try to bring one up kind of crap. I know that there's a lot of like libcucks and people that advocate for crap like that. But no, I would never be in favor of anything.
Well, there's different issues to really kind of consider here, because if you're going to try to help people who are hurt historically, what about the Polish people who were subjugated by the Nazis and then the USSR? Like,
well, there's also, I mean, we can go about, like, I think there are going to be different ways that we can address different kind of historical like oppressions, but the main reason that I think it's so important that we focus on black people in America right now is because this is a really prevalent example of where a huge group of people are still being greatly disproportionately affected by policies that, although are no longer like on the books, the results of those policies still exist, right?
So the problem now is, having done away with those laws, and with the passing of things like Loving v. Virginia, we've now created not just one community. It's not just the black community anymore. It is the poor neighborhoods, and I'm not saying not all black neighborhoods are poor. If you look at where Obama was, in Hyde Park, it's very well off.
Right.
So targeting it based on race is a mistake. We don't think the Obama family needs help. Certainly not. They're some of the smartest and most accomplished people in the world.
Well, I do think
so singling out race would be
Well, I mean, obviously, it's not to say that all black people are living in poverty, and I wouldn't say that to fix systemic racism we have to.
So the answer is class-based resolutions.
Well, I would argue that the reason that black people are in poverty is specifically because they are black, because they were discriminated against because of that. So
that's a bold statement. That is extremely dangerous to say.
Black people were historically discriminated against, and that's why they are today. That's what we were just agreeing on.
I feel like I've had more than enough guests on this show who would completely disagree with you and are literally black. See, the problem.
I don't care what. I mean, that's identity politics. I'm not concerned about what black people think. I'm more worried.
You're not concerned with what black people think.
No,
Here's a white guy saying know what's right for their community, and you don't care what they think.
No, not at all. What I'm saying
and
is
that they're all poor.
No. Yo, did I say that all black people were poor? Did I say that all black people are poor?
It was very generoed.
Did I say that all black people were poor?
No.
You said that they're poor. The sole reason they're poor is because they're black.
No, Oh, good one, Tim.
Isn't that what you said? What did you say?
No, I said they are discriminated against for being black. So it's based on race because they were discriminated against in the past because of their race, right? Obviously, they're not poor because they're black. They're poor because black people are disproportionately poor because black people were discriminated against in the past because of their race.
That's wrong. You know why?
Why?
Because what about immigrants who came here like 10 years ago?
That's entirely different, actually. Are you talking about Nigerians?
Haitians?
I mean, I'm not too familiar with Haitians, but I know Nigerians, for example, are cited a lot of the times as an example of like how can systemic racism exist? And
I agree systemic racism exists. I just think that we shouldn't use race as the factor because you've got multi-generations of families that have now existed outside of the confines of racial covenants and racial laws. You have immigrants for generations who have come in and face completely different circumstances.
Sure.
And if individuals are racist, there's no real hard solution for that because, people still have some level of freedom to associate. Now, I'm actually fairly liberal on a lot of issues, particularly like I think if you're operating a business in public, you have to serve the public within reason. So like, I actually agree that, we should have laws saying if you want to run a bakery and someone comes in and says, I require service, you give it to them. Now, the specific example with the baker in Colorado was that he wouldn't write a message. It's very different. That I actually think he shouldn't have to do. But if I own a shop, you shouldn't be able to say this particular group is barred from entry. That's wrong.
Sure.
Yeah. So if we're dealing with a way to solve systemic racism, which exists, it's actually impossible to solve by using racial law or saying we're going to give money to a community based on their race. Because you'll end up giving a Haitian immigrant,
sure, and
it's not the same circumstances.
Yeah, no. I think that this is a bit of a misrepresentation. And again, I understand that I'm not a policymaker here, but no, I'm not saying we just go give money to black communities. I'm saying we would invest in those poor communities that oftentimes, unfortunately, tend to be black as well. And the reason for that is because of historical inequality. So I'm not saying that racial laws are the solution, but I'm saying that acknowledging that black people are where they are today, largely because they were discriminated against because of their race, that's just the fact of the matter.
They got a bunch of the slaves. It basically came from, they're discriminated against because they were like the descendants of slaves and didn't have any money coming out.
There was no historical wealth.
Why? When we look at American history, we see a history of a lot of immigrants, of a lot of discrimination. A lot of different groups were discriminated against.
Yeah.
But I particularly wanted to get your point on the New York City school superintendent saying, when there's school resources, it shouldn't go to the poor white kid. It should go to the middle class and even upper class black kid.
Yeah, I mean, that's dumb.
Okay.
That's very dumb, obviously. I mean, we're talking about this is such a huge problem that the left does all the time, which is where we are criticizing systems and then they apply that to an individual, which is really, really a problem. I mean, white privilege is like a perfect example. Like, you can talk about, on a statistical level, white people might have some level of privilege over other groups, but if you then go up to one single white guy and be like, screw off, privileged white boy, that's like a problem, because you're supposed to be compassionate towards people and ruthless towards systems, right? That's kind of like what I like to.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.